Hello. So, I have leveled my priest, which is the class I've been leveling for Legion Remix, to level 80, and have done so mostly playing Discipline. I did quickly set up Shadow to do some world quests when I was running around doing some things. Because Discipline was not great as just a straightforward DPS spec. So, that being said, I have played around with all the abilities, which is something that I haven't done in a while. When Legion was out, the original expansion was out, I played Disc Priest. That was when they made the changes to Disc Priest. So, for about half of Legion, I would say, onward, I did PvP and did a lot on my Disc Priest. So, wanted to kind of do a bit of a comparison, go over things. They've made some changes. Give my thoughts. I actually did pretty good with Disc Priest originally during Legion. I had a bit of an unusual build. I didn't take the cookie cutter build, and it was still actually a quite a viable build for um, PvP. I think that was roughly around the time I started making videos, so there may be some videos of from around Legion somewhere. That being said, I wanted to kind of start with a bit of a review. So when Discipline first came out, so if you don't know how Discipline works, so as I said, they changed the spec around in Legion and built it around Atonement, which your spell damage heals all targets affected by Atonement for a percentage based on your mastery. Um, and your mastery is Grace, so your healing and absorption is increased by a percentage on targets with Atonement. So your damage basically is converted into a percentage of healing. And that was it. You had no real straightforward healing abilities, with the exception of Shadow Mend, which would heal for a certain amount at the cost of doing damage to the target for a lesser amount. So, kind of worked along the lines of a reverse Shadow Word Death. Shadow Word Death will do damage, but it inflicts damage to you. Shadow Man would do the same thing. It would heal you, but it would also do a lesser amount of damage at the same time. It was... I looked it up because it hasn't been in the game for, it seemed like, a minute. It was added in Legion. They really didn't make any changes to it from what I saw. They just did some hot fixes with the way it interacted with some other abilities, usually like damage over time abilities that you would have. And then they removed it in Dragonflight. I thought it had been much earlier than that. But that being said, they did add two other things, which I thought were kind of interesting. So for the most part, Discipline has stayed largely the same, I would say. Of course, with the exception of changing the talent around and everything, which I will go over in some degree here in a minute. But aside from that, there was a bit of a drawback with not having a direct healing spell. So When I looked it up, it said that Shadowmen replaced Flash Heal. I don't specifically remember that, but I also don't remember using Flash Heal. So that could very well be the case. Um, Now, what they've added, a while back, they added Renew, which I actually like because this is your heal over time ability for Holy. And this also applies Atonement, and this works perfectly fine. If you need to just throw something on a target, I think this is perfectly fine. It helps balance it without taking away what Discipline is supposed to be, which is you heal through doing damage. The other one, which I'm a bit of two minds about, is Vampiric Embrace, which normally is exclusive to Shadow Priest. You don't have to take it. Renew you get regardless. Vampiric Embrace you don't have to take. However, the other option is a passive, which just increases a stat by a small percentage. Normally, I would say Leech was pretty good. However, with this being the choice, I think Vampiric Embrace is kind of the obvious choice. What I'm of two minds about is it basically does the same thing that Atonement does. It heals based on the damage of your single target abilities. So it's doing the same thing, it's just doing it for a limited duration on a cooldown, which is good and bad. I can see a lot of use for this in raids, maybe in PvP. That's one thing I want to do with this character. I know I've said that before with several other characters, but the current state of Mythic Plus, I think I may really actually make kind of a more of a push to do PvP at some point. And so I could kind of see getting some use out of this. I really have rarely ever used it. I just, with the way these talents are, I don't see anything else that is a better choice. So I just took that and the quality of life improvement, which reduces the cooldown by 30 seconds, increases healing done by 25%. So a minute and a half's not terrible. That's still quite a bit of uptime. And aside from that, everything else is pretty much what you normally have. Now, as I said, I ran a bit of a different version. They took away Purge the Wicked, I believe it was, which was basically an improved version of Shadow Word Pain. So your very, very basic rotation for Disc Priest would be to use Power Word Radiance, which is an AoE heal that also applies Atonement, and then spam Smite, basically. If you're new to Disc Priest and you're finding this kind of overwhelming or you're trying to figure out what to do, just focus on that. Use Power Word Radiance and then just spam Smite. That is your very, very basic rotation with this discipline, Disc Priest. In addition to that, what a lot of Disc Priest started out doing was using, they would take Purge the Wicked, which would, I believe, replace Shadow Word Pain, if I remember correctly. At one point we had both towards the end, and then they just got rid of it. You would put Shadow Word Pain on the target, and that would, as it ticked doing damage, that would translate into healing. What I find is you need at least 3 Shadow Word Pain if you're in a group to really make the healing worthwhile. 1 is still better than none, but 3 seems to be about the amount you want to go for. Much past 3, you're just kind of wasting time. You should probably be using a harder hitting ability that does more direct damage. But I try to get at least 3. So you're kind of, stepping away from the basics of Power Word Radiance and Smite would be to keep Shadow Pain up, keep using Shadow Word Radiance to keep Atonement up, and then keep using Smite. Now, typically, once I use Shadow Word Radiance, I will use Penance because it's channeled, so it's a bit of a quicker ability. It's it's a much larger hitting ability, so that will translate into um, more healing. And since it's channeled, it's quicker. But Smite will still work. It just has a somewhat of a cast time, a very short cast time, and it doesn't typically do a whole lot of damage, but it is still better than nothing. So usually most healers have some sort of a kind of a heal over time or some kind of a spammable ability they can use. That would be Smite. And then your larger heal would be, if I was actually on Holy, I would probably use like Flash Heal. That would be Penance. It's your larger, um, a quicker heal that typically has a little bit longer of a cooldown. Not a full-on, like several minute cooldown, but you can't use it over and over. You have to use it and then wait for the few seconds for the cooldown, and then you can use it again, usually. Or it has a very high mana cost, one of the two. So, aside from that, the other thing I used was Halo. So, Discipline, as I have played it and have had experiences with it, is kind of a situational spec. You have to use the right thing at the right time. So, Smite, Penance, Power Word Shield, uh, Power Word Radiance, these are, and Shadow Word Pain, are pretty much your baseline abilities. Like, these are basic. You're going to use these in most every situation. Um, I was a bit different in that I took Halo, because Halo was always a higher ability that I never got to use that often. So I took it to play with it because it had a really cool visual effect back in the day. And before they changed it, the halo would extend outward and would affect um, every ally with healing and every target with damage. And then they changed it so that is no longer the case. A lot of groups wiped because somebody used halo and pulled mobs that they shouldn't have. That being said, if you use the combo of Power Word Radiance and Halo together, that will do a lot of healing very quickly. So if you're looking for some burst healing, as it were, that is typically what I use. Or if you kind of need a filler ability in certain situations, I will use Halo as well, because it's only on a minute cooldown. So you're going to do damage, you're going to do healing. Both are typically good in most situations. It's just, this is very much, of all the abilities, this is one of the maybe two that are very situational. um, and then from there, they did also add Mind Blast at one point. But we've had Mind Blast for a while now. So I kind of use this in some of the longer fights. If it's just going to be like, this would be more for like a boss fight. Um, and I'll go over more specifically the rotation here in a minute. Um, but I don't use this all the time. Quite frankly, I would prefer not to have this. I don't think it really works well with the overall idea of Disc Priest. I think Smite and Penance works perfectly fine. Mind Blast, again, was one that was more exclusive to Shadow Priests. And for some reason, somebody thought it would work well for Disc Priest. But it just kind of, when they first added it in and I tried to do Battlegrounds, I remember doing Battle of Gilneas and was trying to use this, it really just kind of messes up your rotation. And then, aside from that, you do have a choice of a cooldown. So you can take your classic Power Word Barrier, which I believe was the only your only like raid wide cooldown is typically what they're considered. Um, and this works perfectly fine. This works great. It just was again kind of a situational ability. It was nice in battlegrounds. Again, doing Battle for Gilneas if you've ever done PvP. You'll know what I mean when I say if you're at Waterworks and you're in a skirmish there, you can take this, throw it over the flag, throw it over your allies. It is helpful in that regard. Then at one point, it wasn't too long after, I think it may have been the next expansion, which would have been Battle for Azeroth, I think came after Legion. I believe it was around that time they added Luminous Barrier, which basically just throws a shield onto your allies wherever they are. So, within 46 yards, which is about average for most abilities, absorbing 1.4 million damage, each of them for 10 seconds, so that's perfectly fine. You did have, I want to say it was Rapture at one point that would allow you to spam Power Word Shield, but Luminous Barrier kind of just does that in one ability. Um, so I always take this as kind of an emergency ability. So if you were an Invoker, this would be Rewind. It kind of works the same way. When everybody starts taking damage all at once, you use your cooldown, and that kind of at least slows things down so you can manage the situation and try to heal everyone back up. So, I like Power Word Barrier. Either one is really good. It's really just a preference, I think. It's just you have to use. I believe Power Word Barrier wasn't at. Yeah, at the target location. So there's that. Whereas Luminous Barrier just triggers wherever you know the ally is, so you don't have to worry about staying in it. So there is an advantage, but either one's good depending on your situation and really preference. I would say this comes down to really preference more than anything else. Um, and then finally, before I get into kind of the actual rotation, I did take Leap of Faith. Rarely use this, but as a priest, it's kind of a ability you have to take. I also wanted Body and Soul, so this made the most sense. I have never, in years of playing this game and playing Priest off and on, and I really didn't play Priest until Discipline came in its current form in Legion. I have never used Mass Dispel. You really don't dispel much of anything in the game anymore anyway. Um, so I can't really see the point in taking this. Again, maybe if you raid, maybe I'm missing something there. But even in raids, I've tanked quite a bit through the War Within so far. And there's nothing that I'm seeing that I've had to remove or we've never wiped because a healer didn't remove something off the tank and it wiped the group or anything like that. So I can't really see a whole lot of point in taking this. Power Infusion just is one too many abilities. I've taken it before, and right now, as I will go over when I go over the talents, I really don't need it, and it's really just kind of an extra ability. If you need some sort of a haste increase, which is what it does, um, they changed it where it used to just affect you. Now you can use it on an ally. So there is a bit more of a benefit to it, but I think a lot of Disc Priests use this during Legion because it allowed us to use Smite quicker, basically. So we could just use everything quicker. In PvP, Holy Radiance is an instant ability. I believe there is still a there you go. Ultimate Radiance, which makes your Holy Word Radiance is now instant cast, and healing is increased by 10%. Out of PvP, it had a cast time. In Legion Remix, I believe it also still is instant cast, or it has very short cast time. But I believe that's why because a lot of Disc Priests had Power Infusion. You also had PvP talents during Legion and some other different abilities that increased damage and healing and different things like that. So, um, yeah, you could take it, again, kind of a preference thing. I've had it, I just don't use it that often, so I already kind of have more abilities than I need. So, and as I said, right now, I really don't need it. So it's just, I feel like taking it, it would just kind of set somewhere and I would just never use it. Same thing with Power of Mending. They added this in a while back, which is kind of more of a signature ability of Holy, um, which is a bit weird in that you use it on an ally, they take damage, it jumps to another ally, heals, jumps, and heals as long as they keep taking damage. It's not a bad ability. Typically doesn't do a lot of healing, which is why I normally don't take it. When they added Renew and Perb Mending and things like that, I took a bunch of things thinking there was a way to do, for want of a better term, kind of a hybrid build, and you can't use Discipline as a straight healing spec. You have to do damage to some degree. You can't skip or get around Atonement, or in any way manage it down to where it works with other abilities. At least in the past when I've played around. So, Power of Mending, especially with Power Word Shield, which applies Atonement. Luminous Barrier, I believe, let me see. Does this apply Atonement? Power Word Shield, Flash Heal, Renew, Power Word Radiance, and Power Word Life, which I did not take, apply Atonement. Yeah, so I don't think it does. I think it just puts the shield on. But that kind of null and voids Prayer of Mending, because if the ally has a bubble on them, they can't, it won't jump, so it won't heal. The Throne of Thunder fight with the turtle, I remember people complaining that that was part of the problem, was you'd end up with a shield, I believe, from the fight, and this wouldn't jump. So there's that. And yeah, so I think that's kind of just a brief overview of abilities and things like that. So as far as the actual rotation goes, and this will kind of overlap with talents a bit. So if we start with Power Word Shield, if you type it in exactly as it says for some reason, because we have to be difficult with everything. There we go. So Power Word Shield actually does a multitude of things now. So let me see here. Yeah, casting Power Word Shield increases your haste for 8 seconds, 8% for 4 seconds. So this is why I said Power Infusion kind of really doesn't do anything at the moment, I feel like. Borrowed Time works fantastic, speeds up Smite just enough where you can really spam it and do a decent amount of healing. So it's kind of like, if you were a paladin, it's kind of like using, is it Holy Nova? Which is just a direct healing ability. It's kind of like doing that, like you have to keep using it over and over again for it to do something. It doesn't heal over time or anything like that. The other thing, so of course, Body and Soul, so Power Word Shield and Leap of Faith increase your target's movement speed. Power Word Shield, after casting Power Word Shield, you deal 10% additional damage and healing with Smite and Holy Nova. I did not take... I did take Holy Nova. So whatever the Paladin ability is. I did take... I guess I gotta bit ahead of myself there. So I did take Holy Nova for one specific reason, which was I always end up needing like an AoE ability if I do um, any kind of like older content. Like I've ran a lot of things to farm on my priest, and I don't have any kind of an AoE ability, so I always ended up taking at least Holy Nova. Did take the Rhapsody, the quality of life improvement too, so it'll do more damage. Um, Going back to what I said about kind of situational abilities, if you need a short-term AoE, like for in dungeons, if you're on trash, with this being remix, they're pretty much just a face roll. Um, but if you just want to do damage, you can use Holy Word Radiance and then spam Holy Nova, and that won't necessarily heal if people are taking a significant amount of damage, but it will keep them healed. It's kind of like using um, it's a short-term AoE that heals for a modest amount, I would say, basically. So it's not going to do as well as Halo. It's not going to heal as much as Power Word Radiance will, but it will do a little bit of damage and a little bit of healing. So if nothing else, you have Renew. You can throw a Renew on a player if while you're running between packs or from one part of the dungeon to the next. So there is that. So it's mostly Smite. I don't really use Holy Word Nova all that much. And then when you cast on yourself, 30% of the damage you deal refills Holy Word, Power Word Shield. And then Power Word Shield instantly heals the target and reflects 12% of the damage absorbed. So I think you're kind of getting the idea there. A lot of things are built into Power Word Shield, which actually works. Normally, I don't particularly care for that all that much. But for Discipline, it actually works. Your Penance Bolt increases the damage of your next Smite or absorption of your next Power Word Shield by 3%, stacking up 8 times. And then for the hero talents, I went with Oracle just to play around. Tried Void Weaver. I set up this will be the second priest I've leveled in War Within. So my original, I'll say the one that well, no, it's not even the one I played during Legion. It's the one I started playing during Dragonflight because I wanted to play on the Horde side. She took Void Weaver. I've played around with it a while. It works. It just, for reasons I will mention here in momentarily, with some of the priest talents, this just kind of was too much. So I wanted to try Oracle and see. It gives you this ability which does a variety of things. I don't use it all that often right now because, again, we're in Remix, so there's really not, fights aren't lasting that long. It's really not that difficult. But I do intend to do something with PvP at some point, so I figure I'll play around with this, kind of get used to what it does, and then just kind of go from there. But it also, as you see, does things with Power Word Shield, so absorbs an additional 30% damage, all damage dealt by Smite, Penitence, Smite, Holy Nova increased by 20%. Power Word Shield casts, apply 4 stacks of Power Word Mending to your target. So I do actually kind of like this, because one, you don't have to have the talents. Some Power Word hero talents do require you to, let me see if there's one here, take a specific talent, and if you don't do that, you can still take it, it just doesn't do anything. Especially if it's like the main ability that works with something else. Which to me kind of defeats the whole point of having the trees, because the whole point of having the trees was that you could do more of a custom build. But if you have to take certain things in order for the hero talents to work, then you're not really doing that. Um, but I digress. Being able to throw, like I said, it doesn't typically do a whole lot of damage. Like it only heals for not even 40,000, whereas Penance heals for 726,000 versus not even 40,000. So, but having a little bit of damage, one thing I've learned from Shaman and um, healing stream totem, I believe it is, that just keeping that little bit of constant healing going makes a big difference, especially in longer fights. So I was perfectly fine with this, especially since you didn't need to have the talent. That's just kind of a nice bonus. Um, and then your flash heal, power word shield, 30% more effective when cast on yourself. And I went with desperate measures because I do occasionally use desperate prayer. So, yeah, yeah. So, um, as I said, power word shield does quite a few things. So, as far as the actual rotation, I try to always use power word shield first. And then if you were just doing damage, you see how much quicker smite is. I mean, that is very nice. And then you can refresh it fairly quickly. So you can use Radiant. Go ahead and put Shadow Word Pain out there. Kind of spam smite. So always try to use Power Word Shield first, and then Holy Radiance, refresh, Shadow Word Pain if need be. I try to get through Penance and a few casts of Smite until everything's off cooldown again. In some cases, I'll go ahead and use Mind Blast because it's quicker. And then Penance, Smite. So, the very basic rotation I've been doing is Shield, Penance, Smite, and then just occasionally recasting Radiance to keep Atonement up. And then rinse and repeat. Shadow Word Pain. So there was one ability, Cauterizing Shadows. When you refresh Shadow Word Pain with less than 5 seconds. Now it has a fairly large duration. It lasts for 20 seconds. It will heal an ally for almost 150,000, which is not bad. It actually scales really well. But trying to hit that target, I remember there was some mention of this. I can't remember specifically what it was. If it was during Legion, if it was an exploit or if it was trying to trigger this or something. But there was a way to get that healing. I almost took this, but the problem is when you use your abilities, there is an ability, Shadow Word has a pain, has a chance to empower your next penance, increasing effectiveness. There we go. So each pennant bolt extends the duration of Shadow Word Pain on your enemy by 1.5 seconds, which makes Cauterizing Shadows kind of difficult to use. Shadow Word Pain spreads to 2 nearby enemies when you cast Penance on the target. So as I said, I try to keep it on 3, so that was my thinking in taking this. This hasn't always been an option. I was kind of pleased to when I saw this. That makes it a lot easier than having to constantly target another enemy to just apply Shadow Word Pain. I was just double checking because I thought that was the only one that increases the duration of Shadow Word Pain by 30%, increases its duration by 4 seconds. Yeah, so you'd have to, as you can see, change some talents around. I don't really think, I mean, 150 is not bad, but trying to trigger something so small as within 5 seconds is just not even worth it, I would say. So, um, yeah, yeah. So, out of habit, I keep refreshing it. It's not a bad habit to get into necessarily. Um, yeah, so as you see there, so refresh. You're actually getting almost 30 seconds, which is not terrible. The one thing that I don't particularly care for, and again, it kind of comes down to your options are kind of limited with the talents, and this is one reason why I didn't take Void Weaver, is because of Shadow Convent. When you use your Mindbender, yes, your Shadow Fiend, if you take the talent, it becomes a Mindbender. If you take that, you enter into a Shadow Pact transforming Halo, Divine Star, and Penance into Shadow Spells, increasing the damage and healing of your Shadow Spells by 20% while active. So this seemed like kind of a cool, kind of a fun way to do something different, break up the monotony. Because Discipline Priest isn't the most exciting spec to play, I have to say. Um, it can be fun. It can be very straightforward. It's very kind of rinse and repeat. And because you're not doing direct healing, you have to get Atonement out. I mean, there is a bit of a challenge aspect to it. And you are doing damage, which is kind of nice. You're not just running around, especially if you're doing PvP. You're not just running around doing healing. It does feel like you are contributing more to the um, the group and the overall effort. That being said, um, because of cooldowns and everything, this just doesn't. I don't particularly care for this. I'm just not sure what else to swap it out for. Um, increases shadow spell damage and healing by an additional 10%. Even took the quality of life there just so I could get to Mindbender because I've always taken Mindbender. Um, yeah, it just works very, very kind of clunky, I would say. So you, yeah, so you get like maybe 2 uses of it, and that's it. Um, to be fair, I was trying to use it to do damage in part when I was out in the world, starting to do more things for either the Order Hall campaign or for actual remix, and it just didn't work all that well. Don't think it really, the increase doesn't really seem to make much of a noticeable difference um, with healing either. Um, and tying it to Mindbender or Shadow Fiend, um, I just don't particularly care for it. I never use it with Halo. I can't see the point. Halo does damage or healing regardless. It feels like the bigger benefit would be from Penance. Maybe I'm missing something there, but that's one thing. If I could change something, I would like to change this to something else. But I really kind of wanted Mindbender, so for the moment, it's not something I have to deal with all the time, and it doesn't really change your rotation much. So for the moment, I've just been leaving it. Um, The one thing that I've been playing around with has been Ultimate Penitence, which allows you to, I will show you. So basically it just fires Penance as if it was an AoE ability, which I thought would be maybe a better ability than Luminous Barrier, because I just rarely ever use Luminous Barrier. It's just there as an emergency ability, basically. Because being able to throw a shield on everyone is a pretty good ability to have. This just doesn't work as well as you would have thought. For doing 3.2 million damage and 6.6 million healing, I expected more, and it just doesn't. When I've used it, it's like it just doesn't. It doesn't. It's not meeting the expectation that I kind of had for it. I thought so. For the moment, I'm just kind of playing around with it just to see. I had the talent that I took, swapped out to take it, was Twilight Equilibrium, which basically your shadow spells increase the damage of your next holy spell cast within 6 seconds. Your damaging holy spells increase the damage of your next shadow spells within 6 seconds for 15 seconds. So it just kind of helps, alternates back and forth, which I thought would be pretty good. I thought this would help Shadow Covenant more as well, since I'm getting that little bit of extra damage as well. And I haven't really noticed much of a change so far. Like, when I use Penance, I know I'm using Penance, like it does something. So I kind of expected Ultimate Penance, which basically, like I said, it just does the same thing, but turns it into an AoE ability. I thought it would have a bigger impact than what I've noticed so far using it in, dungeons. I think I've used it in at least one maybe 2 raids so far. So, trying to give it a chance for the moment. If it gets too annoying, I'll just, like I said, swap the talents back and go from there. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much it then. So, again, just Power Word Shield, then Radiance, Pain. Oh, didn't want to use Luminous Barrier. I wanted to use Mind Blast. You can use Power Word Shield again. The nice thing is it's on a fairly short cooldown, so you can use it again and get the buffs again. So, being able to just kind of rinse and repeat, Shield, Radiance, Penance, Smite. That will keep most groups healed, especially in dungeons. Raids have not been that difficult so far. And then Radiance, Halo if you need more of like burst damage. I'm thinking if I do end up really getting back into PvP, I'm thinking Raids PvP. I think Vampiric Embrace would have more of a use in longer fights. Especially with some mechanics in raids or in with some classes in PvP. I could see needing that extra bit of healing